Great. Well, thanks again, everyone online, for being here. And a special thanks to the two of you coming in person. I'm gonna. Oh, I think we just got somebody else here.
I can go get them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who is it?
His name is Richard.
Okay, Richard. Yeah.
Great. So we got one more person coming in person, an OpenStreetMap specialist. So we want to talk about bicycle lanes. I don't need to spend any time convincing any of you that bicycling is a good and important thing, so I'm not going to try to. What I am going to try to convince you of, just very quickly, is that one of the most effective ways of increasing bicycling in cities is by increasing networks of protected bicycle lanes. Okay, so there's a lot of echo up here. What can we do to cut down on the echo?
Yeah, I can use.
Okay, great. Is the sound much clearer now? Yeah, for anyone, can you hear me better? Great.
It's about the same actually, but it's fine.
I don't know.
On the building.
Well, I'd like to get started while Richard finds his way into the building. Okay, so networks of protected bicycle lanes, the infrastructure is the most important thing for promoting widespread bicycling. And we really want to focus not on painted lanes, but on protected lanes. We were able to find, so we had a study last year in Bogota and in Guangzhou, China. And we were able to find that the networks of protected bicycle lanes increased bicycling to the degree that they prevented the emission of about 20,000 tons of greenhouse gases per year. That's like building a BRT line, or planting hundreds of thousands of trees. So protected bicycle lane infrastructure and connected networks is the most important. So how do we build more connected networks of protected bicycle lanes? I think that a very important thing that we need to build this infrastructure is data. We need the data about what currently exists, the infrastructure that currently exists, the streets that currently exist, and we need to be able to keep track of what we're building as we build it and set goals for what we're going to build. And in order to set meaningful goals and keep track of what we're doing, we need data standards. And of course, the most important, something that's very important in these data standards is for them to be the same all around the world so that we can share tools with each other, so that we can share analytical techniques with each other, and compare directly between different cities. So, Cristiano, if I might put you on the spot in a few minutes, I'd like to invite Cristiano to talk about sort of the current best practices in bicycle lane data, using OpenStreetMap, and what he, working alongside the union of the Brazilian Cyclists Union, has been able to accomplish in terms of presenting that data to the cities, presenting it to advocates, and really getting the current OpenStreetMap standard for bicycle lanes to be much more popular in Brazil, and getting that data to be collected much more completely. So with that as a quick introduction, today we're going to be talking about data standards for protected bicycle lanes, mostly through OpenStreetMap, but not necessarily entirely through OpenStreetMap, definitely open to talk about other platforms. And we'll have a focus on cities in low and middle income countries, but of course, I hope that whatever we talk about will also be useful in the global north. Cristiano, are you ready to go, or do you need a few minutes to set things up?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
All right,
Can
take it
start.
away.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen here real quick. So I've prepared very quickly some slides just to give some brief context about the project that we do here in Brazil. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so hi, I'm Cristiano. In a joint project with UCB, which is the Union of Brazilian Cyclists, in a free open translation here, as Taylor mentioned, and with ITDP, we've developed this platform, which is called CiCLaS. The team has people from all around Brazil, and as everyone knows, Brazil is a huge country, so that's one of the biggest challenges right from the beginning here, to standardize the visualization of cycling data in such a huge country. So our motivation was that there was no centralized solution, so lots of cities have been developing their own maps, mostly using things like My Maps from Google Maps, which is like a not open, but like free collaborative tool for creating customized maps. But of course, the data was not open, was not available, and not standardized. So we looked at OpenStreetMap as a solution for storing all the data and also like the conventions on how the data would be represented. Of course, OpenStreetMap already had lots of data about cycling infrastructure. So we worked on building a layer on top of OpenStreetMap. And on that layer, we could visualize that data better. And we could also make it more accessible for researchers and the public in general to have access to the data.
Cristiano,
yes.
just can we get your presentation afterwards so we don't need to produce many screenshots?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I don't have to. Okay, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. I can share just after I finish this. I can share on the chat for you guys. So this is a little how the cycling maps looked in Brazil. So you can see multiple media, so things from PDFs to very technical software like the QGs and Google Maps, as I mentioned also. So lots of different media, different standards. So we started by thinking about what are the main infrastructure that we wanted to represent. So we wanted to represent in like a gradient, like a spectrum of quality. For the cyclists, we wanted to represent the shared sidewalks, which are unfortunately very common, especially here in Rio de Janeiro, where I'm located right now. The cycle routes, also called sharrows, I guess, in English. Cycle lanes and cycle tracks, which are like more like protected infrastructure. So this is a snapshot. I will show in more detail in a few minutes this particular documentation, which was our attempt to understand from the OpenStreetMap data and different conventions on how those infrastructure was represented. So as you can see on the left, we have to humanize the names, the names that people understand. And on the right is the tags. So lots of tags. It might look simple visualizing like this after all the work is done, but it took a long time for me and the rest of the team, especially Felipe, who maybe he's right with us here today, I'm not sure. But Felipe is actually the person on the team that was most like our OpenStreetMap specialist, I would say. And we worked a lot with the community to understand all those tags, went through all the documentation, but of course the documentation for all those tags were not very complete. So this is how it looks right now. But every few months we find out that we needed to include another tag, or we have to revise a little bit those tags. So I hope this serves already a little as a motivation for the discussion that we will have later on data standards, right? Just to mention a few other features that we have on the platform, we also bring other like points of interest for the cyclists, the urban cyclists. So like bike shops, bike parkings, bike sharing stations, all that data comes from OpenStreetMap as well. So we a little how it works. So we use Mapbox underneath as the technology to run the interactive interface. On top of that, we have the data itself, which comes from OSM, so cycle paths and points of interest. And on top of that, we have some features that we've developed, which are help to visualize the data, bring some metrics, filter the data, and etc. Let me just jump this. So some results, because the project has been running for a few years already. We have more than 700 cities, Brazilian cities, who have been accessed in any point in time. 400 average users per month. More than 700,000 total website views, and people have been loving the website. So they are giving really good reviews for us. We had some media coverage, so Arc Daily, which I think is one of the most well-known, and also other international media coverage from the project. So this is the website. I will show real quick here how it works, while I discuss a little bit more some particularities of the project. So just a second. So this is the website. When you open it, it actually has this sidebar closed, but you can open here on to show some metrics. I'm sorry, I tried to use the Chrome translation here, so it wouldn't show up in Portuguese for you guys, but I couldn't make it work. But basically, we have the different layers here. So we have comments, we have bike shops, bike stations, bike parkings, as I mentioned, and the different cycling infrastructure, and you can turn them on, you can turn them off. You can turn on some of the ones that are not on by default here as well. You can turn off the points of interest if you don't want them. So it's a fully interactive map that you can zoom in, zoom out. The points of interest, we try to not overwhelm the users with information. So as you zoom in, we show more information about them. And when you zoom in really close, you can see all the details about it. So all information is from OpenStreetMap, and you can click and have more details. And if it doesn't have enough details, if something is wrong, we have a very useful button here, which takes you directly to the OpenStreetMap page of this particular node. So if you have a login there, you can already click and edit the information. And just to wrap this up, another piece of information I wanted to show you is the documentation for the tags themselves. As I mentioned, there are lots of tags today OpenStreetMap to represent the infrastructure that we have to. So we have this documentation if it's useful for someone. That's like I mentioned, it took a while to get to this point. But this is what works for Brazil. So I wanted to make this comment here that it was a lot of work and a lot of collaboration with the local community of OpenStreetMap to understand what are the tags that we use here. And it's interesting to note that some of them are on the official documentation, but people just don't use them. But we included them anyways. And some other tags, sometimes they will be on the documentation, but we just don't include because they don't make a lot of sense. So this was a very collaborative work. And it works for Brazil. So if we were going to expand such kind of projects internationally, like it would be very challenging because then we have to find what works for other local communities and discuss with them. And also there are always some translation issues. So a very funny example was when we were translating the names of the bike parkings. And on the official documentation, we had lots of types of bike parkings, which we just don't see them in Brazil, like some shapes of bike parking infrastructures. We're like, okay, well, what is that? I don't know how to call this. I have never seen this before. So that's something that happened a lot. And finally, something that Felipe mostly does, but ITDP as well collaborates, are some educational aspects of our project. Just stop sharing here just to wrap this up. Here in Brazil, so since we have to evangelize, as we say, like teach people how to use OpenStreetMap and encourage people to map their infrastructure using OpenStreetMap, we had to do lots of work on doing some mapathons and offering educational material online. And it's very challenging because OpenStreetMap is not super user-friendly. So someone that used to use Google Maps, for example, that can just drag and drop things and start creating maps, on OpenStreetMap, they have to learn the conventions. And I'm not saying that is bad and that OpenStreetMap shouldn't be like that, because it's of course not made for the general public. But at the same time, if we want to encourage like very small towns in the far reaches of Brazil, if we want to encourage them to use OpenStreetMap, it's a challenge. We have to teach them, and some of them have been very willing to learn and some not much. And especially the governments, it's like it was very hard. It's being hard to come to them and say, okay, let's use OpenStreetMap. And some of them are not just not interested in putting the effort to learn and to start mapping things there. So I'm not sure how I'm on time, Taylor, but I think that was basically it.
No, thank you so much, Cristiana. I'm just always amazed when I see CiCLaS and how clearly and effectively it presents the data. I think it's such an effective bridge between this kind of detailed OpenStreetMap data and presenting it clearly to people in city governments or advocates or just public. I have two questions for you, Cristiano. The first question is, so you worked with the OpenStreetMap schema as it existed. Hello, and right, so you worked with the OpenStreetMap schema as it exists currently, and as it has existed, I think, for the past 10 years or so. What did you think were the limitations of the schema? How would you like to see that data schema improve to represent a greater diversity of bicycle lanes or bicycle infrastructure? And my second question is, could you, Cristiano, talk a little bit about your experience working with cities in Brazil, getting them to understand OpenStreetMap, getting them kind of bought in on it? I think there's often some skepticism from cities that this kind of openly editable thing can be trustworthy.
And then, I mean, I think there's this general question that I have in this whole exercise. what is a bikeway? So I think, because this meeting is more about the specific question about how to represent a typology in OpenStreetMap or hopefully any other platform, right?
Right.
But there is the additional question, which is before that, and it is, what do we mean by X? Bikeway, bike lane, cycle lane, like all these? Because when you go to Latin America, then, so for Alejandro, ciclovia will be, and then for Bernardo, ciclovia will be the permanent infrastructure. For me in Bogota, it will be the Sunday. So I think we do need the glossary left of column A, from what we saw just now, right? And I think it will happen like UK, US, and that harmonization is also fundamental, right?
The terminology, not just in data, but in English
Right.
or Spanish.
Right, exactly. And then you go to the, like, let's say there's to the left of column A, which is like the semantics of the terms and what they really mean. And then there's to the right of column A, which is everything that we just saw. Yeah, sorry.
Cristiano, if you want to just try and give a quick response to either of those questions.
Yeah, so I will start by the second one because I think it's the most challenging one. It's one that we don't have a clear solution. On those years of project, we have tried to talk with lots of governments, and yes, there is lots of skepticism about open data. It's a very complex subject, but if I would summarize, I think government by itself as an authority, they want to have authority on the data as well. So they want to have control over it. And with the people that we talked with, they were not comfortable by endorse, how can I say, like putting their name, signing on under something that was not under their control. So some governments had their own data platforms for cycle infrastructure, for instance, and they preferred to use that. It was hard to edit. It was hard to make it available to the public. It was expensive. They prefer using that because they could have control over that data instead of using OpenStreetMap, even if we had all the effort of trying to encourage them. So as Brazil is a very big country, of course, like we had very diverse perspectives over it, but most of them that we've tried to talk with either didn't see the value on making that data available, or they were skeptical about having an open data. So a very quick example that one of them told me, they were like, so it was here in Rio de Janeiro, actually. They just opened a new lane that is exclusive for bus. And on that lane, they paint the asphalt, okay, with a bright color. And they have their own map. And there was a particular citizen who came and said, hey, they opened a bike lane next to my home and it's amazing. And like, it's not on the map, please put them there. And the government was like, it's not a bike lane, it's painted, but it's a bus lane. And they were saying, hey, look at this example. If I let anyone come and edit the map, they would say that's a bike lane, and they don't understand the typology. They don't understand the technical parts of it. But so I don't know, just a funny anecdote. And about your first question, I think it relates a lot with I think Carlos mentioned that this challenge of looking at the data in OpenStreetMap and understanding all the technical parts of it and all the different tags and how to translate that to a version that could be easily understandable by the public, which was our main objective. I think that was the main limitation, let's say, about the data model, because the data model sometimes is doesn't translate directly to what people understand. So our objective was to do something that was very user-friendly. So that was the main challenge, I would say.
There's also a hand there from.
Anna, do you have a question? Sorry, I forgot I was doing audio. Anna, do you have a question?
Hi, yeah, no, it's just a comment regarding the names used, because to me, Spanish is the hardest language to talk about cycling infrastructure, because in Colombia, for example, ciclovia, which we call our cycle lanes, segregated from traffic, is the temporary infrastructure for dias festivos, for Saturdays and Sundays, so or Sundays and bank holidays. And ciclobanda is what we called in Portuguese ciclofaixa, which it's just the painting on the ground. And cicloruta is the cycle lane, which for us is just any lane that can be used by cyclists, so any road. So it's extremely confusing, I would say, like the translation. And I think this should be something thought about country by country in terms of the data, or leaving the possibility of having English and the Spanish translation, I would say, in Portuguese throughout, like Portuguese, and I understand also in Portugal as well, is more or less the same name, so it makes it a little bit easier. But to me, it's challenging when I'm speaking Spanish. It's something that I have a note on my phone that I just read, because then I know that I'm being understood. But yeah, that's my comment.
Great, thank you, Anna. I think we have a comment or a question from the other Anna, and then I'd like to take us in a slightly different direction for a minute. And talk about sidewalks instead of bike lanes, just for a quick diversion.
I have a question on the technical side of your application. I understand you are working directly in OpenStreetMap. Is that correct? You're not using a GIS application.
Yes, sorry, Gerard. Sorry, Anna. I think you. Let's go next with your question. But answering Gerard, yes, we are not using OpenStreetMap. We are using OpenStreetMap extracting it via a service called Overpass, which is like an API, a way that you can extract the data. But we use other interfaces. We use Mapbox, which is like an open technology for building interactive maps.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a combination of multiple layers.
Okay.
Great, and I think Anna Carolina also has a question or comment.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm from Colombia, but I'm working in Harare City. With Gerard also is one partnership between Munich and Harare. And we are working to advise the city, and we are working with the different stakeholders, the civil society. They have a lot of interest to mapping, but we want to collaborate between city and the stakeholders, because we think it's very powerful. Sorry, my English sometimes is not very good. For this combination involve the civil society, the cyclists, they are around the city, and the municipality have the data, have a lot of potentialities for develop the cyclo lanes. So I understand for the Cristiano answer, it's not easy to work with the municipalities, but in some moment you have some collaboration with them. The municipality knows about your mapping, what is the reaction, they are using your information or not, or definitely is for civil society. This is my question, how combine this information with the municipality task? Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for the question. I don't have a very good answer for you actually, because our attempts to engage with governments haven't, I think, worked very well. I think they were not engaged. Like, Brazil is not a very bike-friendly country, I would say, and that's something we felt by trying to engage with them. So they didn't seem as interested in this kind of data. At the same time, we saw that maybe they're interested more in other kinds of data. So, for example, volumetry, so amount of cyclists passing by certain parts of the city. That's the kind of data that they're normally more interested in, especially because, yeah, they already have the data on their own infrastructure, and I don't think we could show them the value of having a standard way of providing this information to the general public and to researchers. So they have their own data, they are consuming it internally. They generally have specialists who use special kinds of tools like GIS tools, so they are used to using it and they consume it internally, and very few of them are seeing the value of exposing this data openly to the public. So sorry, not a very deep answer for you, but yeah, that's a challenge, and we can maybe exchange later some experiences and insights about that.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Cristiano, for all the answers. I think there's a lot to talk about here. And so I'm going to keep us moving and talking about some more things. There's the question of how do we engage people, governments, or advocacy groups in the public. And I do want to hear about that from some of the more OpenStreetMap expert side people in a minute. But I also want to talk about the data standard itself. So we saw Cristiano's breakdown of, I think we call it cyclovia, cyclofaixa, cyclorota, and how those kind of aligned or didn't align with the OpenStreetMap cycleway equals track or cycleway equals lane tags. I'm just gonna try and drop a link here in the chat to the cycleway tag in the OpenStreetMap wiki, so that you can get a sense of how cycleways are currently described in OpenStreetMap. And then I'm also going to share my screen and show you some problems. So you can see here, all three of these roads in different parts of the world are tagged cycleway equals lane.
Mm-hmm.
On the far left, we have a road in Arizona in the US, and that tiny little verge on the side of the road is technically a cycleway and is technically a bicycle way. I think the two on the right are both from Brazil. I could be misremembering. But these, the one in the middle has a little tiny bit of protection. It's got those little bumps. And the one on the right actually has some flexi posts. Like that's not a very solid level of separation, but it is some amount of physical and spatial separation between cars and cyclists. And yet all three of these are currently tagged as cycleway equals lane. And then all three of these, and in fact, all of them are from the same city right here in Washington, DC. All three of these are tagged as highway equals cycleway, which is a different tagging option. The one on the left on 14th Street Northwest is, and highway equals cycleway is meant to represent a physically separated bike lane, fully separated from the main road. And so these tags are being used inaccurately, inappropriately, but I think part of that is also just due to confusion about what they represent, right? So this is the problem, and this is the problem I really wanted to bring people together to talk about today, along with all the associated issues. So stop share. So we have, in the world of bicycling, we have a lot of problems. I don't think we have great solutions yet. And so that's why I wanted to bring someone from a different field of urban transportation to talk about a schema for walking, for sidewalks, footpaths, pavements, whatever you want to call them. A schema for representing data about footpaths in a way that's really detailed, really precise, and I think also very clearly defined and clearly described. So if Annette Caspi from the University of Washington, if you can take a minute to present your work on open sidewalks.
Sure. Hi. Hello. So I have to say I misunderstood the assignment. I'm actually, I thought that it would be beneficial to this group to actually talk more about the open data collaborative approaches and how we got government buy-in for a lot of this. We are now running a $12 million USDOT project to make this data open, consistent, and shared. So maybe I'm not speaking directly, but I'll try to address some of what you were asking about, and I apologize in advance. So today I'll talk about open sidewalks, which is our data schema. It's a data specification, and our overall approach for data collaborative approaches to accessible cities. And my name is Annette Caspi. I'm the director of the Tasker Center for Accessible Technology at the University of Washington. And we design for the fullness of human experience, which essentially enabling the understanding of the full gamut of people that present, whether for cycling, active transportation, pedestrian travel, etc. And you're welcome to connect with us at UW TCAT at UW. In general, the Tasker Center develops, translates, and deploys technologies that increase independence and improve quality of life for people with disabilities. But with our focus on access to mobility and transportation, we've definitely grown beyond just a focus on accessibility. So today I'll talk a little bit about the open sidewalks data specification. I'll talk about our AI for accessibility in Latin America, which was a one-year sort of trial run and how to collaborate with public and private interests in Latin America. I'll discuss our results, and if I have time, and please do stop me when I'm going over the time limit. Also, I'm not seeing the participants, so if you have questions, please do raise them, but if you don't mind, Taylor, to let me know if someone has actually raised their hand, that would be awesome. Thank you. Absolutely. So open sidewalks is an OSM compatible pedestrian network data specification, which essentially means that all of our tagging is compatible with OSM, and yet the data formatting is directed towards the downstream analysis, specifically for trip planners, as well as for transportation and urban planning. So we're really trying to create a pedestrian graph, just like you might be interested in a cycleway graph, but OSM itself as a data specification doesn't really allow for that graphical representation of like the edges. Can we represent costs on the edges? And so we've devised this mechanism of having an OSM schema that is compatible with our like OSM derived format that allows us to do this exchange a little bit like what Cristiano described by taking down the overpass turbo download and reformatting it so that he can use it in Mapbox. We do this at scale, and we have a library to be able to do this so that others can leverage that same library and reformat their data into a graph format. So we started out with a question of, how can I get there from here? So people are asking this question, and currently all the large mapping facility, like digital cartographers out there don't have these answers with detail for people who wheel around, people who push around strollers, people who cycle, that level of detail on what's accessible to me, what is the incline here, how long might it actually take me to get there, not what Google says will take me 8 minutes, but really doesn't. You know, all these things are questions that people approach digital cartography with and don't currently have the answers to. So pedestrians in general, if you want to get to the bus stop, you want to know how to get there from here and what is the level of access that is allowable there. And unfortunately, a lot of agencies end up approximating the answers to this and making really over generalizations about, they use the road network to approximate where people have access to fresh food or where people have access to school or economic opportunities. But really, the infrastructure, just like you guys know about cycleways, is not necessarily there, or it's not equitable in the ways that Taylor showed. Like a cycleway is not a cycleway is not a cycleway in 3 different ways. It may provide different kinds of amenities to people. So as we noted, the data is missing. There's no centralized approach. Every agency collects its own based on a different use case that they need. So first responders have a certain use case, so they collect certain data. And then project coordination in the city collects different kind of data about where the utilities are. And so everybody has a very different way of collecting the data. Also, the data is under-resourced. So they'll only collect it if they were approached with a liability lawsuit, or they'll only collect it if they have this one-time funding to do a sidewalk collection or a cycleway collection or an active transportation. But there's no mechanism to continuously maintain the information. Often they end up with that little chunk of money and they give it to a subcontractor who makes the data proprietary and not open and shared. I can give a very direct example. There was just recently a Baltimore effort that had some money to collect cycle and pedestrian way data. They invested that money rather than open data in a particular proprietary shop, and now they can't even share it across within their own agency. And that's a huge travesty. Like, public funds are being used to collect this data and it's not even shareable within the same agency. That's terrible. So there's this proprietary aspect of it. It's inconsistent because of the different use cases. And a lot of times, as Cristiano said, they think of it as a liability to openly share this data, because they believe that, in the case of pedestrianism in particular, if they disclosed in 2017 that they knew there was this sidewalk issue here and they didn't fix it, then they presume that it's a liability concern for them. The other aspect, as we've discussed, is that the data is undefined. We need network data to be able to make real good analyses of where people can actually connect. Cycleways have the same issue. Like, how do these bike lanes connect? Is there a breakage in the network so that they have to cross this boulevard of like 15 lanes at really high traffic speeds? Like, that kind of information is crucial, and yet cities don't have the network information to really provide those answers. Also, existing data encodes subjective biases. So we talked a little bit about how there are local flavors. I think local flavors are good, but we need to avoid biases like accessible or like available to tricycles, because this is a subjective assessment that people are making on behalf of somebody else who may or may not use the data. So we're really focused on providing detailed, objective information within our data specification. We're interested in data that doesn't encode stereotypes, and that will need that detailed record. Physical attributes, ask people to measure how wide the path is, things like that, which may seem like it's overly onerous to collectors, but at the same time, that's the information you kind of need to know if a recumbent bike will also go here, or is it just like a single a single bike facility. And so this domain of like, what do various populations need is a little bit underexplored. And so that's how we targeted the open sidewalk schema, in the sense of like, we identified the very basic network entities that we needed, absolutely. And that's like non-negotiable for the data formatting and data specification. And then we allow each local use case collection to define their specific objective detailed record that is kind of the overlay or tagging onto those entities of sidewalks, links, and crossings. So we define the data as these various types of highways, or shall we say ways in OpenStreetMap. We have crossings, we have these links that connect the curb to the center line of the sidewalk, and then we have sidewalks, and that's it. Like, it's very simple in terms of 3 entities are recognized as part of the network, and then we really focus on the nodes being the connectors to describe the connectivity or lack of connectivity in the network. So if there's a curb that is raised, that's a discontinuity for some people, and so we have to describe that over the node. We do collect data as a community effort. We've completed 4 different cities, and we're in the process with 11 others right now. What's been really important for us is being able to actually provide use cases downstream as people are collecting it. So we have 2 main platforms that people can use the data. One is a trip planner called Access Map. The other is a transportation planner facility that is called Sidewalks Core. And what it provides is the ability to draw out walksheds from particular locations, so that they're able to assess, oh, for this type of pedestrian who is limited by, you know, requirement for inclines being less than 14%, this is the walkshed that's available here. But there's still big challenges. One is, can it scale to other communities, which is something that was shared here? Can we have less technical data contributors? Like, can we actually harness the power of crowds? And also sustainability in the form of like, who maintains this? Can we get government buy-in so that they would be the data stewards for this kind of information? So our approach with this particular project that I'm talking about, it's an AI-informed data standardization. So we do have some machine learning pipelines that run in advance to simplify some of the process for contributors. And the idea is to being able to have all of these different components, the private organizations, the public, different agencies, as well as researchers, kind of combine together and inform the information in OpenStreetMap. And of course, we're always all about human vetting at the end. So nobody take this to say that we are importing anything that is machine created, but rather we use the machine learning as an aspect of like simplifying some of the mapping. And I wanted to note that in our current effort that I mentioned with the USDOT, there is an approach to how to get government buy-in to have their own vetted releases. Like Cristiano said, like, this is our data as of 2023, and they sign it and stamp it, but also have a way of exchanging and synchronizing that back to the global commons, to OpenStreetMap, so that there's this back and forth, that they are able to contribute data to OpenStreetMap, but they have their own signed copy of whatever it is they believe is the truth, and they don't have to have that concern about data vandalism or the crowds being influential in any way about the data that they're providing. And that's the approach that we're creating in the Transportation Data Equity Initiative, because we believe it's really important for this kind of collaborative effort. Like, we don't want to dismiss the concerns of government about liability, about concerns about like data signing and what it is that we released in 2023. Those are important aspects to government. But we do want to be able to utilize that data and have this synchronization back and forth. And I think that's really important. So that's what we're doing separately with USDOT. But what I wanted to talk about today, which I thought Taylor wanted me to talk about, is how we did a collaborative collection in 5 cities in the same, like at the same time. And there were really the main questions that we were asking is how to do this collection sustainably based in different communities, in languages we haven't approached yet before. And we sort of broke down the challenges in different ways. And I'm sorry for the like text heavy slides here. It's going to be this one and the next one. So first, the challenges were technical. The tooling in OSM is unfortunately not totally intuitive to a lot of people. And learning it is a really large time investment. The discoverability of the tools is difficult. Like JAWSM, we are not asking anybody to work with. ID editor is certainly a lot easier, but still the discoverability of all these tags and the wiki and all of that is just a lot of overhead that people have a hard time with. Documentation is a little bit laborious. Coordinating and monitoring the data collection tasks also has its challenges. And in fact, as a group that we're really interested in the data quality being really good because we want to serve the trip planner with good data. And so for that reason, being able to quality control is important, and the technology is not totally there. Then on the community organization side, like which communities do we include? Who can we even get to participate? How do they structure this effort? Like, how do you get data stewardship and partnership between the municipality in Sao Paulo and the community of people with disabilities and these other advocacy groups and students? How did they work together? And then, of course, the data of like the question of what data should be collected, back to what Cristiano said, we need to be specific and local in the effort as well to recognize that a community existed here before we came, and we don't need to like pounce them with our own ideas of what's the standard. And then how do we keep people interested and organized? And finally, on sustainability, how do we keep the data up to date? Why are people collecting the data, and like who's going to use it downstream so that that will motivate the potential collection? So some of our responses to this, and it's not complete, of course. First is like improving the tooling in OpenStreetMap to assist in the data collection. So some of it is technology that we've injected into the tools. And made it specific to like the pedestrian, the pedestrian tagging that we're promoting, creating a central online location where the effort is coordinated so people know where to go. That's addressing the discoverability, and creating a lot of documentation on how to map, what to map, videos, different ways of consuming and reformatting the data is the information, the documentation. Then on the community organization side, we started with like a manageable set of partners across several cities. We did have to partner with an international organization, which I'll talk about, G3ICT, and they were the conduit to different aspects of like municipality, CIOs in cities, chief intelligence officers and information officers in different cities, transportation officers in different cities. But we also did go like grassroots and use a train the trainers approach to disseminate that mapping knowledge. And really important is to allow stakeholders to self-organize, because communities know what's best for them and they know how it would work best in their own city. And so that kind of non-didactic top-down approach was really important. And then regarding sustainability, embedding the main stakeholders in the process. So for us, it's important to engage people with disabilities in the process. And so we paid contributors in that sense, and 10% of our contributors were people who self-identified as having a disability. And then for sustainability too, is like you have to provide uses, not just visualizations, to allow people to show the impact of their mapping. So we have this pipeline where within 48 hours of you contributing to OpenStreetMap, our access map pipeline will show the data that you provided, which also means that others can test, like, oh, did you put the connectivity there correctly? Like, did you actually connect the nodes? Are they not connected? You know, that aspect is really important to have that kind of feedback on an ongoing basis, because it really keeps people moving as far as their contributions. So the 5 cities we worked with, I know Los Angeles there is kind of an outlier. We wanted a control in the States, and then Quito, Ecuador, Santiago and Gran Valparaiso in Chile, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. They were selected by our community partner G3ICT because they already had municipal relationships with the municipal governments there. And they further supported this work by being sort of the go-between wider community contact, and also they handled the compensation for participants, and they provided translation support as well. So our overall engagement strategy, and these are kind of my hot takes, so I'll just talk about the fact that we have like these 2 cycles. We start out by engaging people. We make sure that it's a community-based or like local focus, so that, as I mentioned before, our data schema is really focused on those like 3 entity types and making sure it's networked. And then all the tags end up being pretty local. And so we engage the OSM community in that local, in the city, as well as the people who are the stakeholders, so people with disabilities, to tell us what their main concerns are. And those are the tags that we will kind of promote within that local area. And then we go through a few cycles that we kind of handhold in a way, and that's guided by our team. And then we provide those tools that I talked about to use and be able to see their data contributions. And that's when the cities kind of go into their own self-monitoring phase, where they define their sustainability goals, they have data self-governance, and they maintain and curate their data continuously. And so that's kind of the different, phases of our work, where we start out with a few cycles of our team guiding the effort and vetting what they're doing. And after we do a few validations and we're sure that the trainers know what they're doing, then the teams are kind of community guided and self-governing. So our train the trainers approach is starting out by having a primary contact that kind of leads the effort in that community, and training them extensively. And then we allow those contacts to self-organize. And then there are supplementary trainings where we involve our own vetters to be able to have like higher level explanations of the mapping approaches, being able to have these facilitated sessions to give them a little bit more input on how they're doing, what they're doing, and things like that. So hot take number 1 is the community definition of data priorities. So we have, as I said, we lay the phase 1 of the network, right? We need these 3 entities. Make sure you collect all the sidewalks, all the links from the sidewalks to the crossings and the crossings. Beyond that, everything is locally driven pretty much. And so that's how we end up with a pedestrian network that includes those different links, and the attributes on the paths are decided and prioritized by the local community. And of course, that decision should be informed by the people who are going to use the data. So as I mentioned, for us, it's important to involve people with disabilities because, we learned that in Quito, they're really concerned about trees aligned in the sidewalks because that's a disruption there. And so they really wanted to map all the trees along the sidewalks. In Sao Paulo, the concerns were very different. It was, looking at very different aspects of what's in the environment. And that part is really important. Hot take 2 is technology assisted mapping of in our case, the pedestrian spaces. So The data is entered on a laptop or desktop using overhead street level imagery, but that part of it is sort of suggested by our machine learning. So they get a file of the predictions, and then they're able to like trace through what our predictions have provided. So it already has the correct highway tagging. And so they're able to just copy it. And so it's a lot less sort of intensive in terms of like the cognitive overload of deciding what is this link here, how does it, you know, and of course our predictions are not always accurate as far as like where the nodes or connectivities are. And so that's where people apply their own input. And then we collect a basic urban pedestrian network and also collect that data of interest that was identified by the local community. And as I said, machine learning is used as an assistant, but not a focus of the effort. Hot take 3 is Retool OSM specifically to our use case. So we've adapted existing software, in this case, the tasking manager, to the specific challenges of pedestrian mapping. And as part of that, we've created a phased approach to doing this collection. So we have different projects that kind of phase the city team through the process. So hot take 4 is simplifying the data contribution through this phasing approach that I talked about. So we start with just focus on crossings and then go to sidewalks after crossings are already connected to the street network. You have to split up the spaces in order to coordinate the mapping, and that's really important. And you need to allow people like to own their contributions in different ways. And that's what the tasking manager is really great for. But we did need to retool it just a little bit in order to make it more pedestrian specific. Hot take 5 was driving engagement through use and not just visualization. I know I mentioned this already, but like within 48 hours of contribution, your mapping input is in a trip planner. Like that cycle was really instrumental in keeping people going. You can check out AccessMap.io for the cities we have completely published, and then each city gets its own instance as they're going through. That's in beta. We don't want to add that to AccessMap.io because we haven't yet vetted all the data, but it's still really important for people to be able to both visualize and use the data. And then the other part of it is that the mapper focused version of AccessMap also shows where the contributions are. So you know where areas have been left untouched, where you might want to focus your efforts. So it also gives you a guidance in terms of like, oh, we really need this neighborhood better mapped, etc. Okay, hot take 6 is driving engagement through competition if possible. We were lucky that Microsoft enabled us to do a team challenge. And you see here our winner, Felipe, who uses a recumbent bike. I don't know if you can see that it's like a recumbent wheelchair. And he mapped a fair bit and won the challenge. And so a well-scoped team challenge really helped us resurrect engagement in some of the cities where we had sort of ebbs and flows of engagement. So this is how we, you can see how those 6 hot takes kind of fed into this engagement strategy of like the 2-phased approach, one where we guide the teams until we feel like, you know, they're able to self-monitor and use our tools, and then they're allowed sort of let go to their own community-guided, self-governed approach. I think I'm over time, so I don't want to go into it. You can read our paper on ACM Compass 2022, but I'll say the paper talks about our train-the-trainer approach and what were our results in the different cities. It talks about progress over time, so being able to track how the different cities were doing at different points in time. It also talks about our own data quality and assessment, because we did a pretty in-depth view of how contributions and training sort of contributed to data quality. And we also looked at data impact and the applications that we provided them with. So who used it, how much did they use it, et cetera. And finally, it talks a little bit about sustainability, like who is still actively mapping, how do we get stewardship and a little bit about government, like bringing in government to this approach. We also looked at some data equity. Our effort did happen during, like, right in the middle of COVID. So it was limited in terms of what we could understand because nobody could go out into the streets at the time. But we did look to some degree about data inequity and equity in terms of the contributions. And yeah, you can find us if you're interested to learn more about this. You can email us, check us out on Twitter, although I'm kind of phasing out Twitter. And we have our Slack channel, and I'll take any questions you're.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Anna. That's terrific. And I'm always so excited about this project, and I really think that it's yeah, kind of a role model for the kind of data that we need to have in bicycling. So thanks for that presentation. I would like to have some questions, but I think I'd like to bring us back toward bicycling first. And then maybe we'll have some, and then we will definitely have some time for questions and discussion afterward. So I'm going to share right, I've talked about two aspects of the Open Sidewalks project. The first being sort of the data standards for how to describe pedestrian infrastructure, sidewalks and crosswalks in a really detailed way, provide all the information that people need. And then, of course, the other side of it is the engagement of collecting that data, working with cities and communities. So talking about bicycling, I want to talk about the next step in representing data for protected bicycle lanes. And I think that next step comes from a team of OpenStreetMappers and cycling advocates in Berlin, Germany, who have been working on a schema to define the type of protection that bicycle lanes have, as well as a team in Medellin, Colombia, who have been working to test that schema and its application in Colombia in particular. So unfortunately, the team from Germany couldn't be here this morning. There's a different conference going on about transportation data in Europe right now that they're at. But they did record a short video for us. So I'm going to play that video and then maybe talk a little bit more about the schema. And then we'll hear from our colleagues in Colombia. So I just put in the chat a link to the schema proposal. So please open this up and take a look. And we'll play the video.
Oh, no.
Well, we just received this file, so let me try.
Instead of playing it through, can we just play it on your computer, Ivona, and share the screen?
I mean, would be the same. Let me just.
No.
We'll try.
So. Okay, so Ivona, pause the video, please. It's not sharing through Zoom. You need to share your entire screen, not just.
Are people seeing what seems to be a presentation?
No, we're seeing, or they're seeing. I'm not sure. I think that's part of the video.
Sorry.
Share sound. Yeah, you have to share the sound on the bottom left.
Yes, now I see the video.
Great. All right.
And I'm from Berlin, Germany, and I'm from the local OpenStreetMap community, and we are are looking into improving the OpenStreetMap tagging schema with something that we call a separation schema. And I wanted to give you a quick introduction in why we are looking into this and what the status is and what next steps could be. So first of all, why do we think we need to improve OpenStreetMap tagging for bike infrastructure? Looking at those two images here, you see that they are both kind of tracks, cycleway tracks, or they can both be mapped in OpenStreetMap as track. But in terms of protection and separation, they're very different. Like the one on the right has basically no protection to pedestrians. There is a good amount of protection to cars, but other obstacles in the way. It's too small. The one on the left is a lot better. There's a curb. There are bollards. So this kind of details is something that we need to get into OpenStreetMap. But why do we need this? There is a great project from Ottawa that you can find on maps.bikeottawa.ca. And what they did is they used OpenStreetMap and created this visual map and categorized every street in 4 stress level fields. The blue one is suitable for children, and the red one is a high stress level. And once OpenStreetMap data is good enough to do this kind of categorization, you can do great stuff with it. Like they showed, this is a route from A to B with high stress, and it takes 13 minutes. But when I want to go the same route with my child and I want low stress, I need about 60 minutes for the same route, which kind of shows that accessibility and a cycle network is not just a collection of pieces of infrastructure, but like even small gaps in the network basically destroy a whole route. And the goal level has to be it has to be suitable for children to use. And you can also do like isochrone visualizations with the Ottawa software and other examples out there. And right now we can't, like we tried using Ottawa, this Ottawa project in Berlin, and basically everything was green because the infrastructure, like the way the city is built, the details we have right now in OpenStreetMap do not allow for enough precision in the calculation of those 4 levels. And that's one reason why we started looking into a separation feature for OpenStreetMap. This is right now our proposal stage, and we are looking into basically testing it and making it bulletproof. And there are a few different parts to this. Like there is the physical protection of a infrastructure. There is non-physical protection like paint or markings. There is a traffic mode, like do we have a protection against pedestrians or protection against cars or other cyclists. And we have the topic of buffers, like is there a buffer, how big is it? And with this schema, which unfortunately becomes quite complex quite quickly, because like you see the images here, like the reality of different configurations are so complex. But with the schema, we at least that's our status quo, we will be able to describe a very different kind of situations. And this schema would allow for a lot more detailed analysis of bike infrastructure and quality, which is important on on many different levels. Another example why it's important is that like the city of Berlin basically has statistics on how much bike lanes they have, and the numbers are not bad. But if you look into the details, like what kind of bike lanes are those are represented in those numbers, it shows that the numbers are actually not very usable. Like there is no way to group or cluster it in actually suitable for children infrastructure and whatever else the other infrastructure is called. And that's an issue, and we wanna do this with OpenStreetMap. So what are next steps for this project? Like, first of all, this needs field testing, in our opinion. Like we need to go out and try to apply the schema to OSM situations, real situations, and figure out which part work and which part don't. Right now there is no tooling for that, so this is manual testing. And then there is a bit of iteration required to, on the one hand, test out if the new data that we collect is actually usable in the way that we want to use it from a data analysis point of view. And the other part is to provide tooling and visualizations for this new schema so users can actually apply it. And that's a quite complex and long process in OpenStreetMap to get tooling going and to get adoption in existing tooling, especially tools that can be used on the go, mobile tooling. Yeah, and that's a huge part, a huge pile of work that needs to be tackled. All right, that's a very quick introduction into what we are looking into. I hope you find that interesting and useful. Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah, I saw it just now. It says propose something.
Proposed features separation.
Yeah.
So there's the link to the OSM wiki page for the cyclelane separation proposal. And I really encourage you all to take a closer look at it. And if you have any problems with it, please put them in the discussion page or email me, and I'll connect you with Tobias. So again, thanks to Tobias and Alex for their work on this. I'm just sorry they couldn't be here today. I could have done a better job coordinating, but you know, I'm glad we all got together on relatively short notice. So we've got about 40 minutes left of the time that we've set aside. I'd like to hear from one more speaker, and then I think I'll open it up for a sort of general discussion of these topics. We can see what particular topics people are interested in. But first, I just want to hear from someone who's taking this schema, this detailed schema for protected bicycle lane networks, and applying it in practice to data collection in a very different context. And that's Professor Mauro Mesa in Medellin, Colombia, who's working with students and cycling advocates in Medellin to test out this schema. So Mauro, if you could say a few words. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do translation. I don't think everyone understands Spanish. So,
yeah, I guess I can help in summarizing.
Yeah.
Every few paragraphs.
Yeah, if you'd like, Carlos could probably help with some translation.
Si Mauro, si quiere usted como que charla y yo le digo como cada párrafo doy un resumen.
Vale, voy a tratar. Okay, thank you very much. You're very welcome for everybody. I'm Mauro from Medellin, Colombia. We are a collective in Medellin that promotes cycling as a transport, and we are making some exercise with data and mapping with OSM and other tools. Did you see the presentation?
Yeah. Yes, we see it.
Okay. We are Ana Maria Navia from GeoLab, that is a seedbed for research of Universidad de Antioquia, and we work together, the collective and the seedbed. So we propose to make a pilot in Medellin in an area that covers some neighborhoods in the city. It's a small area, and we are looking for demarcation and protection, physical and non-physical demarcation for our intricate names of cycleways or cyclovías, like you say, but we separate in cycle lane and cycleway, yeah, cicloruta and ciclobanda. But the objective of this pilot is to get a better standard of tagging with the separation of OSM in some neighborhoods, as I say. This is our team, the GeoLab, Seedbed, and the collective. We are some people. We call for this training to mapping with Mapillary this area. We use social media and a formula to get people interested in this. So some volunteers of our collective respond for the call. And this is how we make some calls for our social media. And this is the work we would be doing right now. We are reviewing the tagging proposal. We have a guide, one exercise before this that we mapping. And we based on wiki of OpenStreetMap and the proposal of the segregation for our German matters. Now we are making the frame of our guide, because there's a lot of information. One of the ministry, the transport ministry of the guide of cycle infrastructure in Colombia, the wiki and the proposed, and our work too. So we are making accord with what tagging we are working, yeah, because there's some difference. And we are planning the Mapathon. We are planning some meetings for this, virtual and physical, for mapping. And this is some photos of our infrastructure in Medellin. We have almost 130 kilometers of cycleways and cycle lanes. And there's a lot of kinds of use of segregate ways to do it. So in this area, there's not too many diverse, but in all the city, we have to learn how to describe. That's what we're doing. It's like this. Wiki on OpenStreetMaps, the Minister of Colombia guide, the separation tag of proposal from the Germany team. So now we are preparing the live webinar, the Mapathon remote mapping, and the validation. That's the presentation we have. Any question or something? Or if Anna wants to show something, Ayana.
Can you unshare your screen also?
Sorry?
Oh, can you unshare your screen?
Sure.
Thank you so much, Mauro. I'm so excited about this project, really taking the first steps toward getting the standard used out in the real world. Not to say that Berlin isn't the real world, but so that's almost all the presentations that I asked people to prepare. share just a little bit about ITP's work just before the end of the call, 50 or so. But I think maybe now it would be good to sort of open things up to a conversation. If anybody has any big questions for any of the speakers. Unfortunately, Tobias and Alex aren't here to speak, but I can try to answer questions about the schema. If anyone has any big questions or thoughts or suggestions or ideas, Carlos.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I think, and then also a little bit of the motivation when we were talking 2 months ago. Like, this is a mess, right? Like, it happens, and we are all in this transformation of having worked not on data stuff and now getting really into the data stuff. So I think we're thinking about how we can start working together, all of the 27 or so people that are here. Could be sort of, what are the agreements that we can reach in what is what, sort of those definitions. And then I guess also the open sidewalks process was very useful to see. I think we can learn, and I'm sure there's other stuff, like Alejandro was also sort of gossiping here on other stuff and asset management, like those kinds of things. So how can we start improving those processes, and how can we start learning from those and not duplicating efforts? I mean, I was really interested in seeing that Open Sidewalks has methods for people to directly provide feedback. So I think somehow documenting those things, I'm sure they're documented, but how can we sort of see those and start testing it? Like, go to Quito and start testing something like that. How can it look like for the case of bikeways, and how can we, I guess, agree? I mean, once we've agreed on a glossary, we'll be like really way ahead, but I don't know if we have to agree on that glossary. Should we have an agreement to disagree? And then like everybody will have their own standard. I don't know how.
I think this kind of gets at, so we were talking before the presentations about kind of not just agreeing on the data standard, but also agreeing on the terminology, right? A cycleway in Colombia is not the same as a cycleway in Mexico. And I'm actually not sure that that's the most important. I think that the data standard is more. If we can agree on a certain data standard for the whole world, then the terms that get used to talk about that data can be different from country to country.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of, how do you basically say, what does X mean in this place and that place? And then the data standard will have a name, which could be X1. But the important thing is to say, yeah, we all mean the same, and it's called this way, that way.
Yeah.
So in the whole conversation, I was really amazed, and thank you for inviting and for letting me witness what you are doing, which is amazing, and thank you for organizing that. I was missing the public government part, because we have now a project in a small city in Ecuador, in Ibarra.
He's World Bank in Ecuador.
I'm sorry, I'm transport specialist, and I'm in Ecuador since 1 year ago. So we are doing some asset management work. And this is usually done for roads. So the firm goes with the asset management methodology, and they only want to have the pavement. We're telling you, no, you're in a city. You need all the equipment, you need the sidewalk, you need the bike paths. So all this asset management work will be like getting all the data on the infrastructure that the city has. And the city needs that, and we are pushing for that because they need to maintain and they need to build, etc. We already have that for roads everywhere in the world. And there is technical regulation that defines what kind of infrastructure we're talking about. And this is different from country to country. So I agree that what is important for you is the data, but the data you have and the data sets will be very dependent on how the technical regulation is defined. So we need some kind of a standard. So we have some technical regulation that allow us to group all the equipment similarly. Otherwise, you won't be getting data, because what I'm seeing here is that all that the mapping thought is about collaboration and people mapping, but I think that there is a good opportunity on harnessing data produced by the public sector, and we should be pushing the cities to have all the infrastructure mapped. And I don't think a bike path, or I don't think a sidewalk is less important than a road, and they already do it for roads, so we have to push so they do it also for sidewalks. That's one. Second thing is walkability, cyclability standards. These days I'm learning about a lot of people doing exactly this in many different places. I don't know how coordinated they are, but this is something that they need standardization. It's not only defining the data for the infrastructure, but also how can we like transform this into user experience. And I think this has two different groups or two different categories. One is objective data, what infrastructure I have, what is the width, what is the slope, and the other is subjective data. And subjective data will be different from country to country. And maybe for walking, I am better off in a sidewalk that has like trees and shadows depending on the environment. So I have no idea how to define these factors. And we are doing with Carlos this pilot for mapping with Trophy, the people that used to map bus routes, but for bikes. And we want to have something set up so people can say what they like, what they don't like about the ride. And I don't know what should be the parameters. So it would be great to have like a long list or some guidance on that. And the last thing I wanted to say, I want to meet with this Anat Caspi because I'm living in Quito and I didn't know about all these efforts and I'm very proud that this is the city more engaged. So I'm back next week and please let's connect and see what they are doing there.
Thank you, Alejandra. Do you think that the kinds of data standards we're talking about here, especially the cyclelane separation schema?
I will be looking into that. I'm already asking because I'm not this kind of guy. I'm not the legal infrastructure kind of guy, but we work with a lot of people like that. And they come especially from roads. And this is something that they don't usually come together. And they are forcing me to start working on roads and I'm learning things that I think are applicable to this. So I will be digging on that and I will get back to Carlos.
Great. I saw some hands up in the audience online. If is it Aline? You'd like to speak up?
Yeah, you got it right on the first go. Great. So Aline Lespina, I live in New Orleans. I'm the executive director at Bike Easy. We're an advocacy group, advocates for easy, safe, and fun biking in New Orleans. I'm also Colombian, so it's great to see so many fellow Colombians in this call. I've been with the organization for 7 years, and in the last few years, I've been part of a lot of conversations that have, like, I work with the city, I work with UNO Office of Transportation, and we have a bunch of counters in the city. And one of the things that we were, or issues we were running into is like, there's all these data, like massive amounts of data, but only a few of us have access to it. And it's like, what kind of, and I'm coming more from the advocacy side of things, where like, what is the need of the people and why is this data important? And like, when I go into city council to advocate for more bike networks, etc., like this data is so valuable for us. But it's like, how do we make it a story and why is this important? So I took a ton of notes. So this is really exciting to be part of this conversation, but I have a few questions for the speakers. So I'm curious, how do you guys partner with advocacy groups, like the folks that are on the ground talking to the folks that are biking or walking? I'm curious if in the networks, especially the one in Brazil, are there counters along the network, and is that data a layer within the bike, the CiCLoMapa? I was curious because that's something we're incorporating in ours as part of telling a story. And then I'm also curious if if anybody partners with America Walks under, they have a walking audit toolkit. So I'm curious if anybody has implemented that in their projects as well, because I think when Anna was talking about the sidewalks, it's not just like, what are the sidewalks, what do they look like, but kind of like the quality of the sidewalk. So I think that would be like a long-term goal for us coming together and coming up with a glossary. Okay, so this is what defines that. And then in the future, maybe we get to a point where like, okay, let's create these ciclorutas or this network or like protected, like however, or X1, whatever term we come up for the different types of infrastructure. So I know it's a lot of questions, but I figure I would just drop them all there.
Yeah, Do any of the speakers feel like they can respond to Lillian's questions?
I guess just a small segment of, of what you asked, Lillian. Hi, nice to meet you. So yeah, our approach was really to remain very objective. So for instance, with respect to quality of sidewalks, we ask people to, so the ADA standard is a 1/4 inch displacement data set. No one's going to collect this for you on OpenStreetMap. That's just not going to happen. So you have to give up that idea. The next idea is to say, well, what is the remaining path like? How wide is it? Is that remaining path usable if there's like a sidewalk displacement? And so that's what we ask people to map, essentially letting us know what is the narrowest point along this path, or just create like a shorter edge right there to say, okay, in this, 6-foot stretch, the sidewalk is actually just 1 foot wide. And present the center line there, because OpenStreetMap doesn't like describing incursions on the side, like surface disturbances. There's not yet a tag for that. And we had a proposal several years ago. People didn't like it. So instead, we'll focus on like, what is the usable path? So even if it segments the block face for that center line, we'll focus on like, what is usable here? What is the surface type here? And how wide is it really? So that allows you to provide a representation of the usable infrastructure without getting into the detail of like, the adjacent issues in, the sidewalk. So that's a small matter. Then a little bit responsive to what the other speaker from World Bank was saying, but this is also something you're talking about. Like, we refrain from providing information that is just about an interpretation that somebody gives, right? But there are human factors, and we need to acknowledge that, right? Like, I have a certain preference for how controlled this intersection is because I feel stressed out when it's a yield sign and the oncoming traffic can come in. So we leave the interpretation for the downstream consumption so that Access Map can take the data and say, oh, if there's just a yield sign, and we ask people, what is your preference? Do you need a yield, a stop sign, or a full-on traffic control, or a bicycle light to designate that this time to be the crossing for a bicycle time? So all of that is to the downstream application consumption, whereas the data collection just gives you the facts. It's like, is there an XYZ here, and how does it operate? How do people get to operate it? Like, where's the button, or things like that? But just the facts, ma'am, is kind of our approach, and that's worked decently well, because it removes that subjectivity that people may apply by having to interpret what's in the environment. I'll finish there.
Thank you. So I'd be curious if Cristiano, I'm curious if he's like, you work with advocacy groups in your Brazil project, like where do they fall in that project?
Yeah, we did actually. UCB, which is one of the main partners of the project. They are an advocacy group. So I think, speaking from my personal perspective as a designer developer that helped to build the platform, it was crucial to work with this kind of organization. I had some personal cycling advocacy projects I did in the past who when I did not have such a strong partner, and that changed everything because they could connect and engage with the local communities and help to spread the word. So just answering your other question about if CiCLaS includes the number of cyclists passing, I think that's what you mentioned, right? Counting cyclists. So no, we don't. But just a few months ago, I delivered a report to ITDP about some of the main opportunities we had for the future of the platform. And one of the main ones is actually making CiCLMap not so much as a data platform, but also a mobile app that cyclists could use on their day-to-day itineraries that they do in the city, because that would be one amazing way of generating this kind of data of counting cyclists, because we don't have this data today in Brazil. It's very few cities that have some counters in the city, and so it's very rare to have this data. So that's what was one way that we thought, okay, we could make this. We have Strava, and I worked a little bit on a project that was trying to use the data, but of course there is a big problem of bias in the kind of data that Strava uses because it's more sports centric. So we thought that mobile app using the data that CiCLMap already uses would be able to generate a more urban mobility centered kind of data, so we could then leverage that and show on the map.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
It looks like Anna has her hand up, and then I think I'd like to ask some words from Jess, who's with OpenStreetMap US, about the sort of technical OSM side of things.
So sorry, I need to leave in 5 minutes, but I want to, I was writing my message. I appreciate all of the initiatives, but I would like to invite to not forget the municipalities, because I agree it's super important, the relation with the municipalities. I know, because I work advising municipalities, I know it's not easy task work with the municipalities, with the advisor, with the technicians. Sometimes they are so reactive with the cyclists or this type of activities, but some people have interest, and this work together, this partnership between civil society and municipalities is super important. The municipalities need to responsibilize about this type of activities, this type of data, and have very, very key responsibility and key task about the manage and work and support the civil society. This is their task, and without them, probably you are working, and what happens with the sustainability of this type of maps or this type of activities about around the cyclo lines, or what happened with them. Exists a lot around the world, a lot of initiatives from the civil society, but if the municipality not appropriate, the continuous of this type of activities sometimes gone, because the civil society change, have another priorities, the NGOs. So the relation with the municipalities, from my point of view, guaranteed the sustainability and long term of these type of activities. This is my reflection. Thank you so much. It was very, very interesting activity today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And actually, I think that connects really well to Jess's work, and also to Rebecca's advice in terms of coordinating with municipalities and governments in the US and helping them use OpenStreetMap. So from Jess at OpenStreetMap US, I feel like most of us here are more transportation or bicycle experts, or more interested in transport and coming to OpenStreetMap, but Jess is coming from OpenStreetMap to this meeting. So maybe she could say a few words about the experience of getting governments or municipalities bought in on new standards using OpenStreetMap. We can't hear you, Jess.
Oh, no. We can see that you turned on your mic, but can't hear you. Oh.
Maybe just test the speaker and microphone in your system. On the bottom.
How about now?
Yes.
Thank you for reminding me. I turned it off on my keyboard for something else earlier. Thank you. Great. So yeah, what I was trying to say is, yeah, convening, bringing folks to around OpenStreetMap data and open data schema, I feel like is my entire job, especially bringing together the government entities and importantly, companies who are using the data as well. So we have had some really great success around getting everyone to the same table and actually adopting data schema, which can be really challenging. But our trails work recently was a really great example, especially because everyone came together over over safety issues, and everyone was actually very heated and charged and kind of pointing fingers at who was the wrong, who was in the wrong. So it started from kind of a flashpoint. We were approached by the National Park Service saying that OpenStreetMap data was because it was being used in apps like AllTrails and Strava and other applications and it was not being displayed correctly. They came to us very concerned that OpenStreetMap data was endangering people's lives. And so we brought everyone to the room, recognizing all of the different roles and factors that was coming into play. And so we brought government agencies together. We brought AllTrails and Gaia and a bunch of different apps. They've been in the room, and we spent a lot of time just trying to figure out our different perspectives, where we were coming from, how the data was being used. And it was really wonderful to see that everyone came into agreement that what needed to happen was we could work together with the OSM schema and make sure that it was being used properly. So not just, we weren't trying to necessarily change the OSM data itself, but what we recognized was a huge part of it was access in our side. So hiking trails weren't being properly mapped. And so two main problems were emerged. Things weren't being mapped as well as they needed to be. And then how the data was being pulled from OpenStreetMap wasn't being rendered properly in applications. And so we've been running projects across the country to improve that map data. And these companies who've been in the room have been really helpful. And you can already see in AllTrails, they've adapted those new standards that have been approved by the government. It's yes, this is what we want to see for improving, how OpenStreetMap data is being used. And so that was kind of the first step. And now we're actually in conversation as a result of that, in OpenStreetMap being part of the data standards across different US agencies, because I imagine it's probably the same thing in many people's experience, where different government agencies, everyone has a different way of describing even a bike lane or, really any type of feature. It's the same thing in the US, and we found that different agencies no one has the same data schema. And so through that conversation, now we're working with the federal government, and OSM is likely going to be part of that baseline of a standard for the data schema. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but I just wanted to point out that yeah, I think that one thing that's been really successful about that is just bringing everyone together in the room and spending that time of understanding how people are using the data and approaching OSM and that schema as a starting point, because everyone has their complications with how data is used internally. But then when they've approached it as, okay, OSM is a great baseline, and then we can build on that, it's really shifted how people are using the data schema. So Taylor, I'm not sure if that kind of addressed what you were hoping for, but happy to talk about something else too, if you'd like to hear more.
That's really helpful. And it's so exciting to hear that news about the public domain map for the US. And I want to talk to you more about that. But we only have a few minutes left today in this call, so I'm wondering what people think next steps can be for us. Are people interested in reconvening this group again in a couple of weeks, a couple of months to talk about our progress or to coordinate action?
I mean, does it make sense to sort of, I mean, there's a lot of links that have been shared, and I think many of us just want to sort of look through all that.
Yeah.
I saw that the chat already has, I think, everything in the chat. I don't know if it makes sense to sort of open up a simple Google Drive and start to sort of systematize what's there. And we can look at that and then find the gaps of stuff that either that is competing or stuff that is missing. And then we could sit down and say, like, okay, what is this? Is this a working group versus just to share our knowledge and sorrows? I think that could be sort of a first thing, because I do need at least 2 or more weeks to sort of go through everything so that we can have sort of a more informed discussion, but not sure what other people think. Like, would you like to talk again soon?
Yeah, I think I'd like to invite people to put in the chat any sort of big questions they think they still have, any ideas for projects, anything they want to work on related to this, that they want other people to know about. So let's put in the chat any kind of outstanding questions you have. I think I can plan to reconvene this group in about a month. And in the meantime, I certainly hope that people will talk with each other directly. Yeah.
And if people are okay with sharing contact details, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I will. So I'll plan to share all the contact information of the people who attended with each other. If you want me to exclude you from that, let me know and I will leave your email out. And I'll also, Carlos, as you suggested, I'll set up a Google Doc so that we can all share resources, links, and maybe organize our questions about our thoughts about questions or work. Any other particular questions or issues that people want to raise in the last couple of minutes we have together?
I was gonna say, if we do a Google Drive with all the resources, it might be helpful to have a tab with the list of participants and maybe a column where we can put like the kind of projects that relate to their a pad mapping or bike mapping. Like maybe we can just share like, oh, this is what's happening in my city and like our project that we're working on. I think that would be a really interesting resource for all of us.
Questions.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Arlene, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So hi everyone, my name is Dana. I am a research manager with ITDP and also leading our Cycling Cities campaign, which is an effort where we're bringing together cities and organizations that are really pushing forward cycling and committed to kind of advancing initiatives around cycling. So data and data improvement for cycling is something that we're interested in and looking to work with you all as part of that effort. So some folks on the call are part of Cycling Cities, and it's great to see you guys here. If others are interested in discussing that more and learning more about the campaign, we're happy to share that. But we can kind of work together to combine efforts, I think, and make sure we have access to a broader group of cities and folks that are interested in this.
Yeah, and maybe that takes me to the last little thing I'd like to share, which is kind of part of why ITDP is so excited about bicycling data, and that's the data platform that we currently have in development, data dashboard, which we're calling the Atlas of City Transportation. I'm going to share my whole screen here.
Is it public?
It is not public yet. I'll send you the beta as soon as it's ready. But this is just the little sneak peek of the Atlas of City Transport. And so right now, this is all the countries that we have in the database, kind of color coded by percentage of people living near protected bikeways. So let's take a look at Medellin. And we can see, so what this is measuring isn't the amount of protected bike lanes, it's the percentage of people who live within a short walk of protected bicycle lanes. And so we can see not just Medellin, but even broken down into, I guess these are the comunas, and how they compare to one another. And this is just using the cycle lane equals track from OpenStreetMap or highway equals cycle lane. If we had more nuanced, more detailed data about cycle lane protection or buffers or widths or paving materials, we could have a much more nuanced indicator of the quality of the cycling infrastructure and even people's ability not just to get to a bike lane, but to use that bike lane to access destinations. So we're very interested in getting better cycle lane data in order to be able to benchmark cities and help cities plan better cycling networks. So,
just a quick question on that. How do you feel about the level of stress indicator?
So the thing is, it's 2 more minutes, but that is the huge discussion. Should we? How do we reconcile or sort of work together in both? I think.
So sorry, I know that we're at time, so people have to drop off. Thank you so much for joining and for being here today. It's really an honor to have your attendance and your contributions. I'm going to stick around and talk about level of stress for a minute. So I think my take on that question for a minute is sort of we should use OpenStreetMap to encode the actual physical facts on the ground. How wide is the cycle lane? What's the protection? And then different people can have different interpretations of what that means for stress. Okay. I think certainly within ITDP, we should align on the way we evaluate that. But it is kind of different in different countries. Yeah. Also.
Okay, so my take, I think that there is one thing which is the actual physical thing that is there, which would be what we've been discussing for 1 hour, almost 2 hours. And then LTS is a way in which you can show what happens in certain places. The thing is, it's sort of defined, but the definition is extremely loose. A child can go is 1, and only a suicidal middle-aged man will go is number 4. But I guess, does it make sense to try and be more specific in that sort of in the function or the what ends up happening in is the way that I understand LTS. And maybe we need to do both things, or maybe we just need to try to the physical details of what is there and then just forget about that.
I don't think it makes sense to try and encode LTS in our data standards. Partly because it's different, right? And in like a calm suburban area of the US, maybe you can just build a flex post separation if cars might respect that, or in Berlin. But you probably can't just protect the lane with flex posts in Nairobi. They expect cars and motorcyclists not to try and.
Right, but that's why you have the staircase graph, yeah? Like that is what we have been using all the time. It's the volume and the speed of the surrounding traffic will dictate whether you have to segregate or not.
Right. And
so
OSM doesn't have volume and speed. It's
true. Yeah, but that's sort of the broader discussion. How do we provide that advice?
Yeah.
Right? Because what normally happens in cities is, do you have segregated bikeways? No. What is your it's sort of a how big is it for you thing? Is it 600 kilometers like Bogota? Is it 130 for Medellin? And if it's more, then it's better. But I don't think that's the case. Like I think 0 is great in ideal cities, like in perfect cities. Like Houghton you could make a point for saying they have 50% bikeways and 50% is not, but you don't need them everywhere. But that is another discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had better traffic speed and traffic volume data.
Right.
We're not gonna get that from OSM. It's not what OSM is for. We
Yeah,
get that
true.
from Mapbox,
Yeah.
from municipalities. And then we need a way to combine that with the OSM data. The OSM data should be as nuanced as possible in order to say, well, is this a street that needs a cycle lane? If so, how intense of segregation does it need?
So it is another working project.
And right. And I think
you-
I think we need to get the representation of the physical conditions data first before we can make decisions about.
You can assume volume, the speed by the characteristic of the road.
No.
No. Assuming that you will have the maximum allowed. Yes, you design for volume and the design marks the speed. Then if nobody uses the road, that's not my problem, but I need I mean, trying to be pragmatic, yes.
Yeah, trying to be pragmatic, but the reality is cars go into 7-Eleven.
No, but
It's
go
not
to-
designed to go into like the 7-Eleven is,
go to the worst case scenario, like, one lane won't take more than 1,000 cars per hour per direction in the peak hour. So assume 100, we want 1,000.
That's
That's an approach.
It's a beginning of a next beautiful discussion.
All right, let's put this up.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And we have the recording.
Bye bye everyone.